Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time as we come to talk about the numbers concerning people who've had to isolate as a result of close contact. One important number that I want to share with you is 9 wickets. That's the situation down in India now. 179-49, so 1 wicket for England to pull off a fantastic victory, and we'll let you keep updated on that. So back to the fight against coronavirus again. Although the numbers were down, and I imagine this might be due to weather and the snow and the problems, it was another good day as the vaccinations continue, and around 1.7 million of you have isolated as a result of close contact since launch of that scheme. Environment Secretary George Eustice joins me now to give us more details. We'll talk a little bit about the problems with Storm Darcy. More on those figures, though. How important is it that people, when they get these figures, they do isolate? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, look, it is important, and I think what this shows is that the NHS Test and Trace app has made an important contribution to this. Obviously, there's been a lot of other work done through Test and Trace as well outside of the app. But as a result of that, around 1.7 million people had those notifications and did isolate because they were in contact with somebody. We think that has had an important impact on dampening the spread of the virus.
Now, we were looking at the rate of vaccinations, phenomenal, around 500,000, sometimes even touching 600,000. It was a decent day yesterday, but down below 300,000. Secretary of State, how much is this down to the weather, do you imagine?
Well, I think that could be a factor in that fewer people are perhaps going out. But I think it's also the case that in previous weeks we've sometimes had a slower start at the beginning of the week and then a sort of stronger finish as things get going later in the week. So you can't really read too much into one day's data. We've made some extraordinary progress so far, though, with around 12.2 million people now vaccinated. I think some 90% now of those over 75 have had the vaccine, and that's obviously an extraordinary achievement in a little more than over a month.
Notwithstanding, that's fantastic. Notwithstanding that, why can't we operate at the same rate on a Saturday as we do on a Thursday, though, Secretary of State?
Well, I understand that it's actually the availability of the vaccine when it's delivered that has the greatest impact. So it's still, my understanding, that it's generally the manufacturing capacity of the vaccine that's the limiting factor. We've set up vaccine centres right around the country, some of these large vaccine centres. The Army have been involved in some of the logistics around this. We've now got around 98% of the population with a vaccination centre within around a 10-mile radius of them. So a huge network of vaccination centres has been set up. I think it's been an extraordinary effort so far, but we've just got to keep pushing at this so that we can get all of those vulnerable cohorts vaccinated in line with our plan.
You talk about the vaccination centres. Can we talk about the quarantine hotels that are scheduled to come into effect as of Monday? How many hotels have signed up to the scheme to provide rooms?
Well, my understanding is that there are discussions going on now between officials dealing with procurement in the Department for Health and some of those leading hotel chains. Those discussions haven't yet concluded. So the short answer is that there aren't hotels yet that have been there because there's discussions that are ongoing. But they are very confident that they will have this provision in place for next Monday when this policy begins.
So less than a week to go and no rooms. Why might that be, Secretary of State?
Well, this is a policy that was announced last week, and discussions with potential providers, I think, started on Thursday. Those discussions have been ongoing. And look, throughout this pandemic, Nick, we've had to stand up things at quite short order to try to react and respond to this virus. We've set ourselves some quite challenging timelines for everything. This is no exception. So, yes, there's a big exercise on now to procure that hotel capacity. Discussions are ongoing, but they've not yet concluded, is all I can say. But I'm told they're confident that they'll have them in place for next week. So
you are confident that the necessary rooms, 20,000+ rooms, will be available on Monday? You're confident of that?
Yes.
Right. Let's move on to other matters. As reminding everybody, of course, you're Environment Secretary and also Food and Rural Affairs. And it's reported that Britain could start boarding European fishing boats to intercept their catches unless Brussels backs down in a row over shellfish. Can you give us the background to that and whether you agree that sort of action might be taken?
Well, I wouldn't link the two. The point that I would make, though, is the export of mussels and oysters and other so-called bivalve mollusks are provided for in EU law. So there is no either animal health or human health justification not to allow this trade to continue. It has done so for many years. It's important to the restaurant trade in some of those EU countries as well, because they want access to high-grade British shellfish. And it's quite unexpected and really indefensible that the European Commission made clear only last week that they were going to change their policy on this and as things stand, put a ban on the trade altogether. Whereas previously they'd been clear that this was a trade that could continue, and all they needed to do was design the right export health certificate.
Can you imagine that you would sanction spot checks on some of these vessels, Secretary of State?
I don't link the two. So the reality is that we have a fisheries protection squad, and we have warranted fisheries protection officers who do that work. They will board a vessel if they think it may be fishing in an irregular pattern, may be targeting species it shouldn't catch. Those are the circumstances in which it will board a vessel. And we're not going to get into the business of retaliatory inspections on vessels, because we don't like what the EU's done on this front. Our approach on this is to get the EU to look at this again and actually abide by its own law.
So you could see a situation in which vessels are boarded over this?
Not over this, but vessels will be boarded anyway, and always are, month in, month out. There is an exercise that goes on, and if we have doubts about any fisheries vessel, whether it's a UK vessel or a foreign vessel accessing our waters, then our fisheries protection fleet will sometimes board that vessel to check what species they're catching.
And lastly, just coming back to the virus while I have the benefit of you with me, the Manchester variation of the Kent strain, what is being done about that, Secretary of State, and where should we be of strain upon strain upon strain?
Well, look, as we go through this, and indeed as we roll out the vaccine, the risk of new strains emerging, and in particular new strains that might find a way of getting around the vaccine, does grow. So this is going to be an issue that we need to address. The answer is to, in the first instance, roll this vaccine out as quickly as we can, but then in short order also start the work, which is already underway, to work out how we can update and evolve the vaccine to keep pace with any new strains that might get around the vaccines that we have. So rather, as we do with flu, where you need to constantly change the mix of the vaccine in order to deal with the strains that are prevalent at a particular time, we may need to do the same on the coronavirus, and that's the answer. For now, of course, we're all in a lockdown right across the country. There's not really much further that we can do to prevent the spread other than what we're doing now. So it's stay in lockdown for now and continue to roll out the vaccine is the remedy.
Grateful for your time. Thank you. George Eustice, Environment Secretary, appearing here on LBC, where at 8 o'clock news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the government's expected to announce mandatory COVID testing for all travellers after they arrive in the UK. It's thought passengers will be screened on the 2nd and 8th days of their quarantine period, regardless of which country they've come from. It's the latest attempt to prevent mutant strains of the virus entering the country. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, says we should think twice before booking a